Hello, welcome back. Today we're doing something I haven't done in a while since the last set, but we're doing favorite cards for Commander. This is from the Foundations set. So yeah, without further ado, I know it's a little late, but here we are. Let's get into it. Okie dokie. Again, this is in no order particularly. So first up, we have Crystal Barricade. 2 mana, 0/4 creature wall. It has Defender. It says you have hexproof, and prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt by other creatures you control. Excuse me, to other, not by. I think this card's for 2 mana, giving you hexproof and also preventing non-combat damage is kind of insane, in my opinion. Granted, this one's definitely more meta heavy for the damage prevention, but I think just 2 mana, you have hexproof is just really good on just a good rate. Plus, it's an artifact, so it can go really good in artifact decks. Any blue or white decks that care about artifacts. Defender is whatever, but it is a 0/4, so that's still pretty good blocker in the early game. 2 mana. I think Hexproof is a little underrated for you personally. I don't know. That's just me, though. Prevents any hand searching, prevents any target player stuff. But I think it's pretty good. But again, like I said, the preventing damage is kind of meta dependent. But I think overall, this card for 2 mana can slot in any white deck basically, and you would be fine with it. Alright, next up we have High Fae Trickster. It's a 4 mana fairy wizard 4/2. It has flash, flying, and you may cast spells as though they had flash. This is a blue version of Vedalken Orrery. If you care about wizards or fairies, obviously it would slot in pretty good there. I do think the problem with Orrery is that it's 4 mana and you have to spend your whole turn on it. This, you can hold up mana. If you want to have a counter spell ready, or if you need nothing to counter, you can cast this instead, and then you can literally just say, "Hey, your end step, play this." Comes to your turn, you don't have to spend your mana that turn. I think it's obviously it's only blue decks that can have this, so it's a little limiting in terms of versus like Vedalken Orrery. But I think overall this card is very, very good. I'm not a huge blue player myself, but I think if for most decks, I think this is a good card to have in it if you're running blue for the most part. And next up, I think is a pretty popular card. Some of the cards I've picked aren't very popular, or at least in my opinion, aren't going to be as popular. But this one, I think most people are pretty high on. It's Blasphemous Edict, a 5 mana sorcery. You may pay 1 black rather than pay this spell's mana cost if there are 13 or more creatures on the battlefield. And it says each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. Pretty straightforward. It is obviously a twist on Blasphemous Act, which also has 13, and then for like the damage it does, and it can be reduced by how many creatures are on the battlefield. I think this one's better, in my opinion. I will say I think 13 isn't that hard to hit, especially in Commander, for creature wise. But even if the only problem is if you have to have 13 at the bare minimum for 1 mana, or you're always paying 5. I think Blasphemous Act, it just reduces the cost. You could pay 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it is. But I think this one is also pretty good. It gets around indestructible. It does sacrifice as well. I think it's better than dying or destroy and exile, of course. Obviously, depending on if the meta is graveyard or not. But again, that's just if the card's good. I think this one's really good. Again, potentially paying 1 mana to wipe the board is always going to be a good rate. And I think 5 mana for sacrificing the board is a very good rate for black, at least in this aspect. So, and the art's sick too. Now this one might be a hot take because I know it's a very high costed card and it doesn't do a whole lot. However, Shandra Flameshaper. It's a 7 mana planeswalker. It has loyalty starting at 6, +2 of adding 3 red. Exile top 3 cards of your library. Choose one. You can play a card that turn. It has a +1. Make a token that's a copy of target creature you control. It gives it haste and sacrifice at the end. And -4. It deals 8 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures or planeswalkers. 7 mana is a lot. And Commander is not very kind to planeswalkers. However, I like this card. Especially because to my knowledge, there's a few cards that can duplicate creatures that you have. Not very many. It's like what, Flame Shadow Conjuring only works for dragons or creatures with flying. I forget the specific one. There's the one that you flip with from Ravnica. I forget the name of it. When a creature enters, you flip it, and then if you get heads, you continue. That's a cool card as well. But to my knowledge, if you're just running red, there's not very many cards that actually make copies of your current creature. So that's, I think, an interesting aspect of this card. Plus, if you uptick it to 2, you're getting a 3 mana reduction back. So it really only costs what? I can't do math. What's 7 minus 3? 4, potentially. So again, there's upsides and stuff to this card. That's why I think I like it so much. And I do like that the ultimate, quote-unquote ultimate, can be used right away. 7 mana, deal 8 damage to some stuff. I think it's a pretty good card. I think 7 mana is probably a little too much. But I think it had to be that high or it would be too busted. Again, I'm not good at evaluating cards. This is all personal opinion. But I like this card a lot. Alright, next up we have a green card, Silen Scavenging. It's a 3 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, choose 1. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, or create a 3/3 raccoon creature token if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. This isn't the flashiest card. It's not like a doubling season. It's not like, I don't know, what's the other one? Primal Vigor. But I think a 3 mana rate isn't terrible. I don't know if this is better or worse than the talent that came out in Bloomburrow that also gives counters. And, I think that's when they attack, though. I don't remember. I don't know. I think this card is good in the right deck. Obviously, you're looking for +1/+1 counter decks, of course. I think that'll go right in here. Pretty good. Plus, making tokens is really nice as well. So if you have that doubling season, you have that Primal Vigor, you have the, what if you're in white, like an Under Procession, you can make that token to trigger those other ones. I think that's very nice as well. Plus, you can beef up your creatures if you need to. Or like you're in a Helga deck, give it an extra counter kind of a thing. So I think this card can see some play in very specific decks. I just think it's going to be a power horse. What's the phrase? Power horse? Workhorse? That's the one. Powerhouse. Oh, good lord. Cut this out. Powerhouse workhorse card in a lot of these kind of decks. And I think it's not the flashiest card, but I think it's just going to be pretty good in those decks. And that's why it's on the list. Alright, we got another artifact. This is Banner of Kinship for 5 mana of generic colors. It's an artifact. As it enters, choose a creature type. The artifact enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. So if you have more creatures out, the better it is. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each counter on this artifact. Obviously, it's going to be very good in tribal decks. Tokens would be better because you can make more tokens a lot easier. Like mono white tokens or any variation of white tokens it'll be really good in. Obviously, if it's really only good in a tribal deck, to be fair. It can work very well in a proliferate deck as well. I mean, even if you only have 1 at the moment, I know 5's a lot, but it'll come up at least 1 counter. So if you have, like, let's say an Atraxa Angel deck, which I have, are probably pretty good just because of the proliferating in it. I don't know. I think this card, obviously, it needs to go in a very specific type of deck, but I think it'll do a lot of work in that type of deck. Alright, I haven't numbered any of these before, but this is the 7th card we're going to be talking about. And it is Sire of 7 Deaths. 7 mana, 7/7, with 7 keywords. First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, Ward, pay 7. I mean, this is a very popular card and a very good card. There's not much I can say about it that other people probably haven't said. But this card is just good. It's keyword soup. It's an Eldrazi, so it can fit in that tribe. It's got a cool name. I mean, yeah, that's about it, honestly. This card is just very good. First Strike and Vigilance, fantastic, good attacker. Menace Trample, fantastic, good attacker. It's a good blocker too because it has Vigilance, Reach, and Lifelink. It can literally do everything you want it to, and it has Ward. And 7 life isn't a huge deal, I don't think, in Commander. In 1v1, obviously, it's a lot bigger of a deal. This is Commander we're talking about, but still, 7 life isn't nothing. Again, it's just a very good card, and I wanted to at least talk about it because I like it. So there you go. And now we're back to Angels. Exemplar of Light. It is a 4 mana 3/3 Angel. It has flying, as most of them do. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever you put a counter man, I can't talk. Whenever you put one or more +1/+1 counters on this creature, draw a card. Triggers only once per turn, and that's each turn. So it can happen on yours if Authority Councils triggers. They play a creature, get a counter, and so on and so forth. Like it'll trigger every turn if you have ways to gain life. I think this card's very good, especially in an Angel deck. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Angels don't need a whole lot of help, but it's always cool to see interesting Angels come out. I think most of the Angels do have like a life gain kind of a style to them. Not all of them, but a lot of them do have lifelink or flying. I think plus life gain is so easy these days. Everything has life gain. This card's very good. It buffs it up. It lets you draw a card once per turn on something you're already doing. And that's like the really good thing about this card. If you're already doing this stuff, it's just very good to add it because it's going to do it what you want even better right away. So yeah, like this card is just very, very good in the Angel deck specifically, but I mean any life gain deck will want this card in my opinion. It's flying in the air. If you have any of the Soul Sisters, you have a Heliod deck, it'll be insane. It'll double the counters. Archangel Athun, any of the ETB gain life, Daxos, Prosperous Innkeeper, the green card, there's so many good cards. There's so many good decks, that this card will go into. Hello, I hate blue. I'm gonna keep it real, gamers. However, I recently I've been starting to enjoy playing blue. I picked up a Garuda deck with the Gigan skin on it. Fun deck. Anyway, this card is Refute. It's a 3-mana counterspell. And I am not a fan of counterspells. I think they're boring. But again, that's just the way the game is played, and I can't, that's how the game is. However, I like this counterspell. If I had to play them, I would play these jankier ones because they're more interesting to me. But this card is a 3-mana instant, counter target spell, draw a card, then discard a card. Pretty basic. It's a common. It's not anything crazy. Is it worse than counterspell? Yes. Is it more interesting than counterspell? Yes. It's a pretty simple card. I won't spend too much time on it, but I like counterspells that if they cost me more to do, but I get to do something else that's more than just countering a spell, I'll probably do it over just regular efficient counterspells. Again, that's just me. I know people like playing blue, and good for them. It's not my bag, unfortunately. But this card is something I would run. Up next, we have another black card that everyone loves, and it's very good. Bloodthirsty Conqueror. It's a 5-mana 5/5 Vampire Knight, so good tribal synergy there. Flying Death Touch. Fantastic stat line. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So it is a creature version of Exquisite Blood. Same mana cost as well, just different pips. This combos with a lot of stuff. Sanguine Bond. I know I think Dina, the Soul Steeper, there's a combo in there as well. And just whenever losing life, you're gaining life. I think Veto is very similar. So this card is just good. I don't know what to say. Obviously, it's a vampire too, so it can go in the vampire show like Vein Ripper, Sorin. This card is good. It's very relevant typing. It's got a good body. 5 mana for 5/5 Flying Death Touch. This is just a very fantastic card. That's all I got. Again, this is a card that everyone loves, everyone's talked about. I figured I'd mention it because the art is sick, to be fair. But yeah, this card is just very good. Aha, these 2 red cards have a theme. This is Electro Duplicate. It's a 3-mana sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste. And at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. And it has flashback for 4 mana. So I was complaining about how there's not a lot of cards that make copies of tokens in mono red specifically. This is another one that does that as well. This card is, I think, very good. If you have a very powerful threat that's non-legendary, or you want to dice trigger the tapping, or Combustible Gear Hulk, 3 mana, make another one, draw 3 cards, or make them lose life. Kind of there's obviously ways to play around it. I think this is just making token copies of things that are good is always going to be good, and in colors that don't do it very often, I think it's a very interesting card and a good card in my opinion. Granted, if you're an Izzet, this isn't going to be doing much for you, but if you're not an Izzet, I think this is going to be a very good card in a lot of red decks. Alright, we have another artifact here with Layline Axe. It is a 4 mana axe equipment. If this card is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike trample, equip 3. I mean, I think without this starting clause, it's fine. It's not the best, but it's not bad. I think being able to get this out of your on the battlefield for free definitely ups it a little bit. Obviously, it's a 100 card, 99 card deck technically because the commander's on it. Drawing that in your opening 7, it's not going to happen all the time. But I think overall the effect it gives, +1/+1 double strike trample, is going to be very good. It's basically a colorless version of Embercleave. Obviously with timing restrictions on when you can cast it, of course, but stat line wise, I think this card is going to be good, especially in equipment decks, of course. I don't know if you put it anywhere else. Maybe if you had like an artifact deck, if you get it out for free, kind of boosts it that way. But I think for equipment decks, it's going to be a very popular card, and the art's cool. It's pretty simple, but I think the art's cool. So I like angels, and this isn't technically an angel, so there you go. It is Valkyries Call. It's a 5 mana enchantment. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature you control dies, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains flying and is an angel in addition to its other types. So it turns all your non-angels, non-tokens into angels. That's pretty much it. It's a very simple card. I think it's a cool card. It's very reminiscent of what's the name of that card? The Mothra reskin, or I guess the Mothra is the reskin. Luminous Broodmoth. Very similar to that, where if a creature without flying dies, return it with a flying counter on it. This is enchantment form. Obviously, you can't beat. It doesn't work in angel decks, unfortunately. But I think overall, if you have a lot of creatures dying, I think in like a sacrifice deck, I think this is like your top end, right? Because you can get double triggers. You can double the amount of sacrifice stuff you're doing, like aristocrats. That might be a stretch, but I think it's a cool card. I like it a lot. I think it has a lot of potential to go in decks that like are constantly doing a bunch of shenanigans with like sacrificing, or you have non-angels, just pop it in there as a 5 mana enchantment, kind of on the high end, and just see how it works. I'm gonna be trying this card out quite a bit. I just think it's I think it's a powerful card and probably do some good work. All right, now this isn't a full new set. There are a lot of reprints. I'm gonna talk about a few of them here, just because I think they're good reprints to talk about. Authority of the Councils. It's a 1 mana enchantment. Creatures your opponent control enter tapped. Whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you gain a life. That goes in almost every white deck will probably want to run this. It's just a very good card. It's nice to see a good reprint of it. Next up, we have Imprisoned in the Moon. It's a 3 mana blue enchantment aura. Enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. Enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tapped add to a colorless, and it loses all other card types and abilities. This is a good way to get rid of commanders that are problematic. You don't want them to recast them. It's a good way to get rid of it. Most people don't really target lands, especially if it's like a hey. Obviously, they can remove the enchantment, but I think overall, this is just a good card to reprint. It sees a lot of play. Back when I've been playing, I see this card all the time. Granted, obviously, it's meta dependent, of course, but being able to hit another land or a planeswalker as well, I think it's really good. Next up on the reprint list, we have Liliana Dreadhorde General. It's a 6 mana, 6 loyalty planeswalker. It has a static ability. Whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. It has a +1. Create a 2/2 black zombie token. A -4. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures of their choice. A -9. Each opponent chooses a permanent they control for each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. Yeah, pretty good ultimate. This card hasn't seen. I think it's seen one reprint up until when War of the Spark came out. I think it was Ravnica Remastered. I think it was reprinted in. Obviously, it's in Foundations as well. So it's really nice to see this card more accessible. Because Ravnica Remastered wasn't as accessible as the Foundations is. So it's nice to see it in an actual reprintable thing. But this card's very good overall. It's a very dominating planeswalker. Does a lot of work, and it's nice to see it reprinted. Last but not least, we have Doubling Season. It's a 5-mana green enchantment. If an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of the tokens. And if an effect would put one or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many counters. Good in Planeswalker decks, good in token decks, +1/+1 counter decks. It's a very ubiquitous card in those a lot of styles. It's nice to have it reprinted. I think it saw reprinting in Double Masters the second time, maybe the first time too, but that was the most recent reprinting, I believe. It's just nice to see it again, make it cheaper, more accessible for people. And that's all I got for these. Well, there you have it. Thanks for checking out the video. Those are some of my favorite cards for Commander from Foundation specifically. Some pretty popular cards, some not as popular cards. A few reprints in there as well. But yeah, thanks for checking it out. Let me know what cards you've been liking from Foundations. I know if you're watching this video as it releases, I'm a little late. I've just been busy with work, and unfortunately this is about the time I was able to get it done. So, but yeah, thanks for checking out again, like I said, and I'll be doing some more of these. Innistrad Remastered's coming out soon. Excited for that one. But anyway, I'll catch you guys next time.